G'day, folks, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Welcome back to Talking Series. It is the coach here, as always, and I have a pretty special guest here. We are talking all things magical supremacy in the Cities of Sigmar. It is Hallowheart, and I'll be talking with Michael Clarke. Michael Clarke is a world-renowned, well, at least Australia-renowned, would be world-renowned when the ETC kind of kicks off. But Michael's done incredibly well with the Cities of Sigmar, came 7th at CanCon with Hallowheart. He has dominated people at Summer Smash and SAGT, and he is a very good player. So I thought there was no better person to bring in and talk about the Cities of Sigmar and Hallowheart. Michael, hello.
Hi, Coach. Thanks for inviting me onto the show, mate.
How do we go with the introduction?
That was fine. It's No, thanks for pointing out a couple of my better performances I've had out there. Took a while to build up to that. My first couple of tournaments were a bit embarrassing in terms of the overall performance, but practice makes perfect, and the last few outings I've done okay.
And I'm pretty sure the world would know your name by now. If the ETC would have happened, Australia would have dominated. Yourself, Liam, Big Wood, you guys would have crushed it. But I'm really excited to talk to you about Cities of Sigmar, specifically Hallowheart, because you and I talked a lot, and we did a lot of list teching in preparation for CanCon and post CanCon, and we kind of, collaborated a lot and shared ideas. And I know you and I had some very different ideas on how we build our list. There's a lot of commonality. So you've done very well with your list. You've stuck with Hallowheart. So I really want to kind of dig in and understand how you build Hallowheart. What are the strengths of the army? Explore some of the lists that you've kind of pulled together. And kind of like start putting it all together. It's like, what would it look like if you were like a magic elf player? If it's human, we can kind of like play around with that. How's that sound?
Absolutely. And I think, Hallowheart's really attractive in it can service so many different play styles. And as you noted, Coach, we've chatted before, and you've done a different play style, different Hallowheart when you've brought it to the table to what I've done. And we've also seen success at tournaments in the UK with yet further styles. It's a very flexible army. Cities itself is very flexible, but Hallowheart, I feel, it takes that flexibility in what you can do with it to another level as well.
Yeah, and if anyone who's watched this series in the past, they would know by now there is no one silver list. It's not like we're going to tell you the single list that's going to dominate and bring world supremacy to your gaming table. There are variants of it, but the purpose is really to kind of look at the rule set, understand what Hallowheart is all about, and then think about how to build and optimize and, bring your favorite models into this. And that's another key as well, right? I'm not really a big elf player, so I don't want to bring in too many of the elf, like the elf sorceress. But for someone who's an elf player, they want to build around that kind of style. So it's pretty cool that you can kind of bring your flair and kind of bring your army to the table. We're just going to show you some of the paths you can take to get there.
Yeah, I also love that aspect of cities as well. You can really let your imagination run wild with conversions, and we'll get it later in the show to a couple of my own.
Let's bring it up now. Let's just get straight into it. Let me ask you, how did you get into Warhammer, and then what drew you to this particular book?
So Warhammer, I started out, I picked up a Isle of Blood set back in the dying days of Fantasy Battle, and really that was around the hobby side. I just wanted to paint some miniatures as a bit of a relaxation, and I was doing a bit of that, and then it got parked and put it away. When I moved back to Geelong a few years ago, I'd moved from Melbourne to Brisbane, then back to Geelong, and needed to create some new social circles, meet some new people. And I sort of had a look at, hang on, someone's starting up a Age of Sigmar Tuesday night event. So the local Geelong crew, there was a call out for players to start a new games night. I went along to the second night. I missed the first night due to a work clash. And on the second week, I went along there and met a few guys who seemed like really great guys. And okay, I'd like to make better friends with those, meet a few new people, and start building up from there. Basically, I took the Isle of Blood set that I had, so classic high elf stuff from the old world.
Yeah.
Started painting that up and started playing with that as mixed order to learn the game. And basically it's developed out from there as a hobby. At the moment, I actually have 4 full armies, 10,000 points of mixed order, mostly city stuff, 5,000 points of Zench, 5,000 points of Feck, and about 3,000 points of Ogre Moor tribes. So I've expanded the hobby quite significantly, but something keeps just bringing me back to mixed order, or mixed order nowadays is embodied in Cities of Sigmar. So it's really started out on the hobby side and then met a good crew in the Geelong crew and started playing games with them. And that's now my crew in Geelong, and it's an absolutely fantastic scene down in Geelong. We've got
shout out to the Geelong crew. Couple of names you want to kind of give it a shout out to. I'm sure you'll get ribbed because you didn't name everybody, but who's a couple
exactly.
of
That's
who's
why
a couple?
I'm avoiding calling
all
anyone
right.
out.
We'll just shout out to the Geelong crew.
Too dangerous to miss anyone.
Michael loves you all.
I love you all, guys, and I cannot wait for coronavirus lockdown to be over and we're back to our Tuesday nights and our every second Saturday night at my shed to for our gaming.
Yeah, that's sweet. And you know what? Cities of Sigmar is such an awesome, it puts you in the mortal realms. It's probably the first book that really, truly puts you somewhere in the mortal realms. It has so much conversion opportunities. And ever since I've done this series, heaps of people are tagging me on Twitter and Instagram and, sending me private messages, just showing off their concepts and their ideas of where their army is in the mortal realms and what they've done to kind of convert that. So it's an exciting opportunity, and I'm all about the Wizards. I always have been about the Wizards, which is why the very first army that I ran under Cities of Sigmar, hell, even under Firestorm, which was the I guess the pre-tome to this, I was running Hallowheart. You only used to get like +1 to unbind.
Yeah,
it was rather hot garbage back then, but I'm all about the Wizards. So this show to me is going to be brilliant. So you've talked about what drew. Sorry.
I think the Firestorm is a good point. Like I actually was a Hallowheart player as Firestorm for at least 3 tournaments, 3 pretty significant tournaments as well. So there was something about the backstory, the lore, the combo you could do, and like you said, the rules at the time in Firestorm were pretty underpowered as faction rules. Yeah. So it was not necessarily about picking power lists, but there's it appealed. And then the day that Cities of Sigmar dropped and flicked straight to the faction ability, the city ability for Hallowheart, it was like, whoa! I now have a top tier army to play with. This is going to be fun.
No, that's great. And you're right. I mean, I famously mentioned a few times on my channel that I had bought 2,000 points of Sylvaneth. I had built it. The day that I picked up the book was the day that Cities of Sigmar was announced at, I think it was Nova. So that whole thing is on the back shelf. But luckily for me, like you, I've got a bazillion points of Cities of Sigmar. And I know something that you're very proud of is you and I were both up for nomination at CanCon, which is the world's largest Age of Sigmar event for coolest army. So and you had an awesome display board. You had a lot of conversions. I wouldn't mind a little bit about your story and what's your Hallowheart all about.
Yeah, so my Hallowheart generally has an elf theme, but though I've recently also played with a bit of dwarves in there as well. And even where I've used the humans, like Free Guild, I've tended to find elf stand-in convertible models that would work better to keep it all in that same theme. As you said, Magro, we both got nominated at CanCon for coolest army, and that was my objective at CanCon. Winning the games was bonuses as well, but I was really gunning for it. And my bid to get into that shortlist for coolest army was very much based around these 2 models here. So on the left is my converted Hurricanum, and on the right is my Luminarch. And I took both of these in the list to CanCon. And we'll chat about that tactically later on, but yeah, I had the vision firstly for the Luminarch with the 2 big ass lasers on it, and I almost can't believe I managed to pull it off. I'm so proud of this model and what I pulled together. It's it must be about a $500 model with all the bits that I had to scrape together to put all the different kits to put it together. But it's super proud of it. I really stretched my hobby side to get that out there. And then I had to make a brother for him, a brother dragon, Drago magic tech thingy in the Hurricaneum to match on the left.
Yeah,
Which,
look, it's pretty neat, and I think that's the cool thing, right? Like when I look at my Hurricaneum, I built another one, and I'm using this the Celestant Prime swirl around it. That was a good $150 model. I've got Demigris pulling it. There's another $100. But when you look at the army, it's well worth the conversions, and your army is fantastic. Your army was great.
Thanks, man. So was yours. Yours was incredible too, and the display board with the rats coming in under the sewers was something else. The I think a point you made earlier, you can play cities either as kind of thematically as humans, as elves, or as dwarves, but there's so much potential that you don't have to use those models. You can build it around them. Like one of the things that was kind of driving me to make those two conversions beyond kind of the vision was, well, I'm quite an elf themed force, and the classic out of the box models for those two things are don't fit a high elf like look and feel and style. So I needed to make something that was a bit more elfy in theme. So elves riding elf arch wizard riding a dragon with two big ass lasers pinned to it. Yeah, that'll do, rather than some human cart thingy.
All right, well, you're about to badmouth humans.
That's where we're into our conflict in our styles here.
I'm about to kick you off the stream, and I'll just talk the video myself. So I'm just going to lightly pivot and ask you, and I'm going to bring up the rules in a second, but what are the strengths of Hallowheart? If I'm a new Cities player and I haven't played with Hallowheart, or maybe I've been dabbling, what are the strengths that they bring to the table?
Yeah, so the 101 of it is... firstly, they tap into cities with an extraordinary range of options in your toolkit to build a list around, as per any city. But Hallowheart specifically is about the magic. It could be probably the most powerful magic casting faction in the game, with getting very large bonuses if you roll right to your casting. And then you could control your opponent's magic barrage, countering you by ignoring 1/3 of their spells. With each 5-up roll, you can ignore their spells. So that's the core concept, that you control the magic phase. You're the masters of magic. And I think Hallowheart, they contend with a few others. They contend with Seraphon, with Lord Crowe, and maybe a Nagash style list, and of course Zenchu's thematically their arch enemy in the fluff. But yeah, between those four lists, this is the order version of powerful magic. If you want to play with wizards casting fireballs, then this is where you come.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with Hallowheart, and you start seeing this for the first time when people start building their list, is they go all in on the magic. And while magic supremacy in a Hallowheart is really strong, you can cast spells on a +8. At the same time, it's a trap. And if you put all of your eggs in one basket, you quickly realize you don't have enough bodies on the table. You're not going to be claiming objectives. And there's only so much a bunch of wizards can do to win a game. So, yeah. And I think you and I, and there's a couple of other Hallowheart players that I've kind of talked with, there is this fine balance of tapping into the magical supremacy, but not putting too many points in that you lose out on bodies, you lose out on combat, you lose out on movement.
That's exactly right. You could take the bonuses too far, and it sometimes gets tempting because you go, oh, I could get a 90.2 cast wizard with powerful spells. Oh, I could shove another one of those in the list, and oh, I could get my bonuses with empowered endless spells. Oh, that looks even better. We'll get to that as well. But you can end up investing exactly too many points, and you really need to balance that and treat magic as one of the... I think one of your other guests talks about that 3 places of power concept, or three arcs in your 3 different threats you need in your list, and magic has to be one of the threats. But if you end up putting 1,500 points into Magic with all the tricks, that's too much. You're not leaving enough flexibility left over.
Yeah, the wizards are expensive. Endless spells are expensive, so you can quickly get up to like 1,200, 1,300 points by going down this route, and then 800 points of bodies. You're going to get slammed by. I still remember my very first game with Hallowheart. I put a lot. I played locally, just at a games workshop, just to have fun with my mate, and I put a lot of eggs in the wizard basket because I wanted to try out the magical supremacy. But then I got turn 1 charged by a Maw Crusher and like 15 piggies, and there was nothing I could do. And we've got a lot of turn 1 charging. We've got the Ogre Maw tribes with the stone horns can do that. There are ways you can do it with Terrorgeist. There are just so many things that. It's very dangerous, and if you don't get a turn to put on your spells and your buffs and your abilities, that collapses.
Yeah. Not only that, I think Magic is inherently a dice game. So even with the big bonuses we can get in Hallowheart, you're still in random territory, and you're still in a single dice roll. You're not diversifying your risk over 60 rolls where weight of dice reduces your standard deviation of your rolls, and you can become statistically reliable, where 2 dice on a cast can still flub. And frankly, almost every game that I've lost, not every, but vast majority of the games that I've lost running Hallowheart is when I've rolled a double 1 for a key spell that I really needed to get off.
Yeah, there's been plenty of times where I've rolled a double 1 or a 3. I might have only got like a +2 or a +3 to cast from the command ability, and that still only gets me to like a 5 or a 6, and then the opponent's just like,
then you can unbind it.
Unbind.
And that's the danger. If you're all in on Magic and you really need that one spell, basically any list, and this goes for Age of Sigmar generally, if you're reliant on a random roll, a 3+ prayer to go off, or a 6+ spell to go off, even with buffs and bonuses and rerolls, it's inevitable in that clutch moment you're going to flub it, or the dice will betray you, because that's what dice do. So you've got to diversify that risk so you're not as reliant on it, and you treat it as a bonus and an awesome, and enough she'll go off. But
and this goes back to too heavily investing into the Magic. So, Michael, what I might want to do is I might want to just look at some of the abilities that you're going to get from Cities of Sigmar and then Hallowheart. And I'd love your expert opinion, being a Hallowheart player who's done very well on the scene, to explain to me not what the rule is, but how you tap into it, or what's the benefit to you as Hallowheart. So when I look at some of the things, the first one we've just called out is this empowered by the realm. So your spells are, your endless spells are empowered. They're all of your malign sorcery spells, not your forbidden power spells. But basically, if a Cities of Sigmar wizard casts an endless spell, and it has one of those abilities, so empowered by Akshi or Shaman or Gur, basically they get better. So at a higher level, like what does that mean to you as a Hallowheart player?
So of all the cities, Hallowheart get the best bonus out of this. So firstly, most endless spells are somewhat expensive, or the good endless spells are somewhat expensive. So getting your bonuses to cast is going to get that 7+ Geminids of Ulgush off. Secondly, the empowered obviously gives greater synergy. Most of these spells are better versions of the textbook spell. So inevitably, even the Geminids, to continue that example, high cost spell, it's a pretty incredible spell that's a bit of a base of most lists. You're getting the extra bonus of dealing even more reliable damage with them, with the empowered version. So nice synergy there. Then finally, and again, continuing Geminids as the example, predatory spells can sometimes backfire. They're a double-edged sword in the game, and if you lose control of a predatory spell, it can backfire and come back onto you. And with Hallowheart, you could get a baseline 5+ to just ignore that Geminids or that purple sun that just comes back over you. And sure, 5+ not guaranteed, but I'd rather at least have a 5-up chance, a 1/3 chance to ignore a Geminids effect than have to face it naked.
Yeah, so we're talking a little bit about the Hallowheart rules that we'll get to in a minute, but essentially what I'm hearing is that your endless spells get a little bit better and you don't have to pay for it. So
Yeah.
shackles can be set up a little bit further. Well, spell portal doesn't have to worry about the range. Check the war scroll; they're just a little bit better. So
Soul Screen Bridge, which we'll talk about, that has a longer range, so it gives you a very significant teleport threat range. Geminids is awesome. The other aspect around the spells that is a bit more subtle is for most wizards, you're facing a triple choice. You've got your baseline spell on their war scrolls, which is usually pretty good. You've got a faction spell, which most factions get some sort of ability in the game to pick a spell for their wizard, and usually you pick the best one, or the one that's going to work tactically. And then if you add an endless spell in as well, you don't get. Most wizards can cast one spell, and okay, do I cast my endless spell? Do I cast my war scroll spell, or do I cast my faction spell? One of the awesome things about Hallowheart, and we'll get to that, is your wizards get a bonus spell to cast, which makes that ability to cast the endless spell doesn't cost you not being able to cast your really good war scroll spell as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of redundancy with the spell casting. So let's quickly get to the Hallowheart rules. You're starting to we're ruining Christmas. We haven't got to the Hallowheart rules, but basically, long story short, endless spells are good. Hallowheart is locked into the realm of Akshi, which means essentially you can only choose artifacts from Akshi. Before I move into the Honored Retinue, I just want to clarify something that I said earlier that is wrong. That is these abilities. So Amplify Sorceries does impact the Forbidden Power spells as well. So it's Forbidden Power and the Malign Sorcery. What you're looking for is the Empowered by Akshi Shimon. You're looking for that on the War Scroll. So just fixing up something that I said that I've just quickly realized my brain was not connected to my mouth.
Cool.
You've got the Honored Retinue, which basically means that if your general, if you choose your general and it has 6 wounds or less, you pick one friendly unit that has that can be its retinue. The unit can only be 5 to 20 models, so anything above 20 models can't be a retinue. And essentially, what's going to happen is you can roll a dice every time your general takes a wound or a mortal wound. If they're within 3 inches of that retinue on a 4+, they're going to pass it off to the unit instead. So, how does that apply to Hallowheart?
Probably the specific way it applies is you could take a slightly more squishy model as your general. So say a sorceress or a battle mage, which is usually pretty squishy, 5-word model with no real save. If you put them near a bodyguard and use the loyal shields rule, you can pass off that wound and they become a bit more survivable to stay in the game. One of the kind of 101s of Age of Sigmar generally is kill the support heroes. So your opponents are going to be gunning for any squishy 5-wound, low armor save support hero that's hiding in your backline. And so, yeah, if you've picked a battle mage or sorceress to get the advantage of the extra spell casting in Hallowheart, you can add them as your general here and make them a bit more survivable.
Yeah, so if you take the Hurricanum or the Luminarch or a Sorceress on Black Dragon, they have more than 6 wounds, so they're not going to be able to be a part of that. But if you are going to take, as you mentioned, a Battle Mage, a Sorceress, a Knight Incantor from Stormcast, they're going to be able to pass off those mortal wounds, which is awesome.
Yeah, there's a few other variants of that which we'll get when we get to my list that have benefit as well when you take a non-wizard hero like the Anointed or the Rune Lord. But
yeah, and that's my general. I take the Anointed on foot.
Yeah.
But long story short, if you take a smaller foot troop, not only will you get Lookout Surf for the -1 to hit, but you'll also be able to pass off mortal wounds if there is that Honored Retinue.
The other advantage of this, again in the more subtle gameplay, is you would tend to keep your foot hero then with the core of your army together, which means that if they have useful command traits or command abilities that act as synergy, they could trigger it over the core of your army, where something like a sorceress on Black Dragon or a free guild general on Griffin, you might have sent off on a mission to take the flank or something like that. So if you've given them a useful ability that would synergize with your army, well, definitely put it on the small foot hero that's going to stay with the core of your army. Put your general as your foot hero, and you get the benefit of this extra bonus protection.
Yeah, well, not only that, but the other benefit is going to be this rule called Wise Counsel, where basically at the start of the hero phase, if your general's within 3 inches of the adjutant or adjutant, depending on how you want to say that, but the adjutant, you roll a dice, I don't know, 4+, you get an extra command point. So, which is super fascinating as well.
Yeah, and generally I just go for lieutenant because I stuff up adjutant, whatever. So lieutenant. This gives you an incentive to take 2 of your small heroes, keep them together, keep them near the retinue. What it does require is, however, to be carefully thinking in your deployment phase. Okay, where's my retinue going to go? Where do I want my general to go, and where do I want the lieutenant/adjutant to go, to get the buffs that they are going to cast, or their command abilities or command traits that they're going to cast. So you have to really be careful with your deployment here, because 3-inch range is not very far apart. You need to keep them together, and several times I've misdeployed and forgotten about it and end up regretting it. So really forces you to think ahead, and I think that's one of the themes in general with Hallowheart. You have to. It's a complex army, complex list to play, and you have to really think ahead on these kind of things, and maybe take some notes down through your deployment phase or whatever to remind yourself, okay, I need to keep those 3 aspects of my army together, and they need to work well together.
I think the cool thing for Hallowheart compared to the other cities, though, is Wise Counsel, in my opinion, is easier to do. And the reason it's easier to do is when you start looking at the battalion that we have, which is a very strong battalion, it rewards you for having 2 wizards next to each other. So if you have a double battle mage or a sorceress and a battle mage, or whatever combination you might have, not only are you going to get the battalion benefit, but you'll also get the Wise Counsel as well. So that for me is stronger in Hallowheart than it is in the other cities.
Hallowheart, even beyond the battalion, even the Arcane Channel ability, which I think we'll jump to pretty soon, it encourages you to stick together with those overlapping kind of buff ranges.
Yeah. The last rule we've got is the Stormkeep. So 1 in every 4 of your unit selections can be Stormcast Eternals. This doesn't count as your allies. It is just basically going to be choosing a Stormcast unit, put it in your army. They gain the Cities of Sigmar and the Hallowheart keyword as well. So that's obviously replicable across all of the cities. But in the example of Hallowheart, that Knight Incantor, for example, becomes a Hallowheart wizard. Michael, what does it mean if we're bringing a Stormcast into this army?
Yeah, we'll probably get to those faction abilities, but the Stormcast wizards get the faction cities bonuses, the Hallowheart wizard bonuses, so they become more powerful versions of themselves as wizards. The other one I think to think about with Hallowheart as a fun list is add the Stardrake. The Stardrake adds bonuses to cast for other Stormcast wizards, as well as negatives to your opponent's casting. So to reinforce that kind of magic supremacy, as well as giving you a big tanky unit, a Stardrake actually works pretty well as one of your Stormcast units into cities. Probably not the most hyper competitive version of Hallowheart, but it's a fun way to play that has a nice little synergy in it.
Yeah, and it means you can bring in a Lord Arcadum, you can bring the Lord Aquila. There's so many cool armies, and then you can just do whatever you want with it. And we'll talk about our lists and some ideas, but the Knight Incantor is the quick one that everyone kind of jumps into because it gives you access to the Stormcast, the Everblaze Comet. It has the auto unbind once a game.
Absolutely, but the look on an opponent's face, if you've got the Lord Arcanum combined with a Star Drake, he finally takes the Star Drake down, and maybe you've got the Star Drake built in the so-called unkillable Star Drake mode, which if anyone's interested, they could do a Google search on it. I won't go through that tactic, but they finally kill the Star Drake, and then your Lord Arcanum clicks his fingers and it comes back alive with 1 wound. And then you rolled into your magic phase and heal it up for D6, and the damn thing's all of a sudden sitting on 5 or 6 wounds again in unkillable mode, while also giving that kind of magic supremacy synergy. Again,
And
probably not a hyper tune, but quite a fun way to play.
That's a pretty scary idea. So that's what you get for being Cities of Sigmar. And then when we go that one step further and choose our allegiance to Hallowheart, a couple of other things you're going to get. One, we've already acknowledged this city comes from Akshi, which means that you must choose the artifacts from malign sorcery from Akshi. You can't choose it from any other realm. You're landlocked to Akshi. You then get this rule called Eldritch Attunement. So basically, each time a friendly Hallowheart unit is affected by a spell or an endless spell, you can roll a dice. On a 5+, you're going to ignore the effects of that spell or an endless spell to that unit. So what's that all about?
We already talked about this. The hinted at it before. It definitely takes the edge off having your predatory endless spells rebound on you, or if your opponent is an aggressive caster like Zench, you could definitely take the edge off them. Not only do you inherently have a lot of unbinds anyway, because you've got lots of wizards, if you're playing this faction, so you'll take the edge off his casting via unbinding a few of them, and you'll take the edge off how much he does by ignoring 1/3 of them. Again, a Nagash style list that's trying to shoot a machine gun of arcane bolts at you, you're ignoring 1/3 of them. It's quite an effective thing. It is a little bit situational because across the overall meta, majority of spells, not all, but majority are generally buff type spells rather than aggressive type spells. It's only some factions that genuinely use hardcore aggressive magic. So sometimes you'll find you'll barely even use this, even if the opponent has aggressive magic. For example, Feck can be built quite strongly around a magic type build with a lot of bonuses, but basically all their spells are buff spells, which this has no use in mitigating.
No, I will call out though, there is a very critical word in that sentence, and it says you can roll the dice. So if you try to put like a mystic shield or you try to put some type of buff onto your unit, you don't have to roll a 5+ on your own spell. It is an optional thing. I know there are some units in the game. I believe it's a Stormcast unit from memory that you must roll even if you try to mystic shield your own unit, but this is optional for Hallowheart players.
A good point, Coach.
Just for wording. So if you're like, I don't want to. Next one is you've got the Hallowheart wizards can cast an extra spell in each of their hero phases.
Yeah, this is really powerful. You've basically doubled the effectiveness of your wizards, or your small caster, single caster, 90-point battle mages or sorceresses. All of a sudden become 2 casters, would be the cheapest 2 casters in the game, and they have access to quite effective spells and synergies to cast on. This is over and above the other abilities. This one, in my mind, is the ability that makes Hallowheart competitive and good. The other ones are nice, but really doubling the effectiveness of your single cast mages, being able to cast your endless spells and your good faction spells or your good war scroll spell is really powerful. As well as that is if you've got three or 4 casters in your list, and that would generally where you're going to land if you're playing this on balance, like as Coach said earlier, you could go all in here and end up with 12 or 15 spells, but you're probably going to balance it out at 3 or 4 casters, 6 or 8 spells. You're going to overwhelm your opponent's ability to unbind. It's forcing them to go, all right, I've got 3 unbinds in my list. Which of these 3 nasty spells am I going to reserve my unbind attempts for? Which means you're getting at least, say, 5 free casts. And make sure you're you use that tactically to, take advantage of the free casting that you're inevitably getting.
Yeah, I got one list that I got up to was 11 casts. I may have gotten to 12 casts with cogs. No, was it cogs? Yeah. Long story short, I regardless, even when I was at 11 spells in one particular game, it was way too many. I found out that I had run out of good spells to cast in the right situation. So while I could do all this damage, when it kind of got to spell 7, spell 8, I was doing rubbish. So, really that 7 to 9 was kind of my sweet spot. Yeah, 7 to 9 is like my sweet spot. But
I think that's right. You end up with inefficient. You're just casting the whatever spells, a bullshit Mystic Shield or an Arcane Bolt that doesn't actually change the game. At best, if you don't outright just run out of spells to cast. Even with 8, sometimes you're out of range. In turn 1 in particular, you can't actually effectively cast your shorter range spells. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And before I move on to the last ability, I will say what's really cool for me is I would take a lot of redundancy. So there was some particular spells that I really, really wanted. Ignite Weapons, for example, is one that I really wanted. By having double casters, it meant that I could have at least 2, if not 3 Ignite Weapons. Doesn't mean I could cast 3 Ignite Weapons a turn, but it means that I could choose which is the right wizard to cast at the right time. And that was really powerful for me.
Absolutely, and you've hinted on another rule that synergizes in here, that Hallowheart wizards get to pick 2 of their faction spells, not just 1. So you get a lot of flexibility and you can build redundancy. And I think it's actually quite important to build redundancy into any list that the synergies are based on a 5 wound model with no armor save or a 6-up armor save. It's they're going to die. Your opponent's going to target them. They are going to die. So you need to have some degree of redundancy in the late game to be able to get some nice buffs up.
Yeah, spot on. The final one we'll talk about, and this is, we've kind of already alluded to this, the Arcane Channeling. So you could use this command ability at the start of your hero phase. If you do so, pick one friendly and Hallowheart wizard hero and roll a dice. That wizard suffers a number of mortal wounds equal to that roll. In addition, until the start of your next hero phase, you add that roll to the casting roll made by friendly Hallowheart wizards while they're within 12 of that wizard. Now, before, Michael, you explain something, I will call out that this rule has been FAQ'd. So we'll talk about the FAQ version, but do go check out Games Workshop's FAQs to see what we're about to talk about here. So
probably first off, when this rule first came out, it was eye-wateringly good, and we'll talk about how the FAQ
it was bustedly good.
It was so busted good to hell. Like, I was actually kind of starting to prepare my my victory speech for winning CanCon. Like, it was so powerful that it's you could expect to dominate. The hint in the rule as written on the page before we get to the fact is twofold. One, you could ignore those rules, ignore those mortal wounds that you take. So, for example, you are from Ashki, and we'll get to the artifacts. But
maybe just to avoid confusion, maybe we'll just talk about the
that's probably a good point.
Yeah, so just so someone doesn't.
Yeah, so the today version of it is you cannot, or if you ignore any of those mortal wounds, for example, you pass them off with the Honoured Retinue or an Ignax Scales or any other thing that ignores the mortal wounds, then you don't get the bonus. You only get the bonus for the number of wounds that your wizard actually suffers. The constraint that creates is the risk of your little 5 wound wizards. Basically, if you use Arcane Channel, you roll a 5 or a 6, they instantly blow their head off with channeling that magic. So instant death.
Which I've done. Which I did at CanCon actually for lols.
Which you could do, and if you're desperate, you can put the Arcane Channel on them. If you absolutely need to roll the dice to win the game to take the gamble, sure, do it. But you don't want to be doing that turn 1 or 2 and blowing your wizard up. The second aspect that got nerfed out of this is you can only do it once. So you can only spend the command point once per hero phase rather than, as written, technically multiple times. That, of course, now makes it risky. You spend a precious command point and you roll a 1 and you get a grand total of 1 to your bonus to cast. Sure, better than none, but it's cost you a command point and it doesn't bring your statistical reliability level up high enough to make sure you get those 6+, 7+ spells off in a range that cannot be unbound. So it becomes a little bit swingy if you only get a small roll on your Arcane Channel and then you flub a 2 roll or a 3 roll on a key spell and you get unbound.
So let me break down the process for everyone. So start of the hero phase, I'm going to do Arcane Channeling and I roll a dice. Now let's say I'm going to do it with my Hurricanum. So there's no mortal wound safe there. So I roll a dice. And it's a 4. Now my Hurricanum doesn't get +4 to the cast because it's only the other wizards within 12 inches that get the +4. Now that Hurricanum, if I roll a 4, is going to take 4 mortal wounds. If I had Ignax Scales, which ignores mortal wounds on a 4+, it's the total damage that it takes. So if I save 2 of those 4 wounds, it means I'm only getting a +2, even though I rolled a 4. So it's based on the damage that the Hurricanum received. When I do it with my Hurricanum, I would opt to not take my 4 up. But what you can also do is you can then heal it. So you can take the damage and then use something like Emerald Life Swarm. There is a native healing spell in Hallowheart that can then heal up those 4 wounds. Are you confused yet?
Yeah, it gets complex, and you have to be very careful how you do it because when you overlay the FAQ. One thing to note though, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 95% sure. I think Ignax Scales, you must use it for any mortal wound, so you cannot.
I stopped taking Ignax Scales on my Hurricanum for that pure reason.
So you can't use that. You can't use that trick in case you get it too high. Otherwise, you'd be able to
check the facts, guys. For my rules lawyers who are watching this, if I have to do Ignax Scales, then straight up, you're only going to get half of those that dice roll potentially in additions.
And it's cost you a CP.
It has cost you a CP. The cool thing is that I've gotten my casts up to like a +6, +7, +8. I've gotten some really high casts. Your sorceress can get +2 on a cast. The Hurricanum gives +1 to the cast. I can get up to +6 here with the Arcane Channeling, but it's also going to be a +1, which is not a lot. And then the Battalion gives you a +1 to cast. So this is where the trap comes in, that it's really, really, really strong. You put too many eggs in the Hallowheart basket, you're not going to have a lot left to screen, to claim objectives, to handling combat. And do other stuff.
And I think and you've already started it, this ability drives an essential list choice. You have to have a high wound wizard to take the hit to use this ability. So that in the book means you've either got Hurricanum, Luminarch, the Sorceress on Dragon, or the Battle Mage on Griffin. Frankly, Battle Mage on Griffin's pretty average.
It's hot
Sorceress.
It's hot garbage.
The Sorceress still can maybe work, but nowhere near. It's really
if you're running a pure Darkling Coven, yes, the Sorceress on Black Dragon's good, but for anyone else,
no. And Darkling Coven itself, it's hard to make that super competitive. And then so really it drives a list choice that you need one of the Luminarch or Hurricanum, or both, and I actually took both to CanCon, where I know Magro, I think you just took the Hurricanum, and we'll chat through benefit of both of those as we get to this build stage. So really, that instantly sinks 280, 290 points instantly into your list, and it starts to drive your list construction that you need to pick one of those two as the core to use that ability. Now, luckily, they become 2 casters themselves and therefore look quite efficient and get other synergy from the other Hallowheart rules. And both of them buff your magic phase one way or another anyway. The Hurricanum buffs your spell casting even further, and the Luminarch gives you greater control by buffing your defensive magic, your unbinding.
Before I bring up your list, Michael, and we talk a little bit about the construction and then putting everything we've just talked about into practice, I'm getting some questions in the chat that I think is really relevant and topical right now. And that is, people are curious about, we've talked about the magical supremacy of Hallowheart, but how does it stack up to the likes of Seraphon, your Lord of Change and your Zench? Because Seraphon currently is dominating when you look at Tabletop Simulator. We're seeing, the Starborn Lord Crowe really, really dominating.
I've had 2 recent games against that list, and I got my butt handed to me both those games.
Is that from inexperience that you have, you're learning and you're trying to understand it, or are you just finding that they just do it better than us?
Yeah, I think it's the first game definitely chalked up to I had no idea what it did and huge mistakes, and we the mate I was playing with, we were playing in the spirit of learning how to do it, so it wasn't a competitive cutthroat game. The second one, I was a bit rusty, made a few mistakes, but he played it better. He could stuff my magic down. Luckily, he had an arcane in his deployment, so Crowe got his unlimited range unbinds with I think +3 or +4, and he could just shut my magic down totally with 4 unbinds and not. You can Hallowheart can survive not getting all your spells off. Like if you only get half your spells off, okay, you're still in the game and competitive. But if all of them get shut down through either poor dice rolling or your opponent being able to stuff you, you do start to push uphill a little bit there.
Look. If you get a really good roll with the arcane channeling, and you've got enough spells to cast, you will be able to dominate in Magic. But would I say they go toe to toe? I think, but at the same time, Seraphon is probably all in on the Magic. If you're building the Starborn Crowe, not talking about the Coalesced, but if you're going Starborn Crowe, and this is not the Seraphon show, I think you can go toe to toe, and I think things like the Luminarch and there's some tools that you have that will help us. And this is probably
it's one of my tougher matchups for sure. One of Hallowheart's tougher matchups. It's not a auto lose. I actually think it's going to be a balanced 50-50 that will ultimately come down to player skill and a bit of luck on the dice, which is what all good games do. If you're against a top player playing a optimized Seraphon Crowe list, we can win it. It's not you don't give up or walk away from the table. There is pathways to victory. It just won't be an easy win.
So what I brought up is, and you were very kind to send this to me, because there are lots of different ways to build this list, and you've given me 3 different examples. And what you've illustrated here is a core force that you're kind of building around, and then you've taken 3 different varieties. So maybe we'll start with the top of the umbrella, and that is your core force. So I can see that you've got a Hurricanum or a Luminarch, you've got 1 Battle Mage or a Sorceress, the Sisters of the Thorn, the 30 Phoenix Guard, which are coming at about 980 points. Why is this your core? Talk me through each of your decisions. So let's start off with the Hurricanum or the Luminarch.
Yeah, so I think we've already talked a little bit about the Hurricanum or Luminarch. The Arcane Channel basically forces you have to take one of those 2. And it's actually a really tough choice. I think most players default to the Hurricanum, and I've probably default a little bit more to the Hurricanum than Luminarch, but only by a smidgen. The Luminarch has, in my mind, a better scroll spell in Far's Protection for the playstyle. You put Far's Protection on Phoenix Guard and they get the -1 to hit. That's a pretty significant defensive buff. On top of it, 6-up ward save. The other thing I like about the Luminarch, or the other 2 things I like about the Luminarch over the Hurricanum is its 6-up DPR save or ignore damage save effectively adds 2 extra wounds to it. So the Hurricaneum's an 11 wound model, so is the Luminarch 11 wound model, but with the ward save or the DPR save, it statistically becomes a 13 wound model. May not sound like much, but those 2 statistical extra wounds when you're getting blasted in the early game by long range magic or a or long-range missile fire from Caradron or a Alpha striking Flamer Horde or something, those statistical 2 extra wounds can make the difference between the damn thing surviving versus being sniped off first turn. And given that it's the linchpin of your army, I like it there. The other thing I like about the Luminarch is all of these list versions are high drop, like 10 or 11 drop mostly, which means you usually have no choice of turn, which most of the time your opponent puts you in as first turn, so they gun for the double. It's usually a good choice for your opponent to give you the first turn. A lot of your damage spells are 18 inch, you're a bit out of range. It's there's only certain builds that can have an really effective first turn in here, but we'll get to those.
It's interesting you say that, because actually
gives you a 30-inch laser to actually start chipping some damage out of those backfield heroes that he's hidden away.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is I was taking the battalion, so most of the time I was actually getting to tell my opponent if they go first or second. In the average game, I wanted to give up first turn because I want them closer to my spell casting.
Absolutely.
If I take in most scenarios, if I take first turn, that is 1 less spell casting turn. However, I can do some buffs, but all my damage stuff, I'm really limited. So
yeah,
keep that in mind.
Absolutely. With a high drop list, and I've almost always played high drop lists, and I haven't taken the battalion as a variant on coaches. With a high drop list, you'll usually be given first turn and you usually can't do much about it. But yeah, I try and build the lists around, and the later variant 2 and variant 3 give you some pretty significant options to be a first turn threat through the Soul Screen Bridge that makes the opponent question you. Variant 1 and 2 both have Geminids in it, which means if you get double turned, you put the Geminids out in the midfield and you roll the Geminids over to deal. When your opponent wins the turn roll and has double turned you roll the Geminids over and debuff his army, so you can take the hit of your opponent double turning you back. Obviously, 30 Phoenix Guard in the core are usually pretty tanky. You could take a bit of a hit, though they do melt a bit under a sustained double turn, but they can take it a bit if protected by screens.
And the reason they do that is because they have a 4-up additional save after their regular save.
And so the variant 2 and 3 both have the Soul Screen, which gives me an option to do a first turn go aggressive, potential Alpha Strike or other aggressive type movement. Variant 1, it was interesting, and it was specific for CanCon. In CanCon, we had access to Mirror Pool, which was a teleport spell. We were playing in the realms and had the spells. And the first turn shenanigan I would be pulling there would be to teleport the Sisters of the Thorn forward, usually the Sisters, but sometimes the other wizards, and then cast Geminids from quite a forward range. And at that range, your Geminids are usually ripping into your opponent's entire army. So you can actually end up doing a lot of damage if you can get them up there that first turn. So really, as a high drop list, I wanted to have the options in any of these lists, in that I don't actually care that much if I'm given the first turn or have to take the second turn. Taking the second turn with Hallowheart, your opponent does not want to face a double turn against any of these lists. The Mortal Wound ranged output, or in the third version of the list, you've got some Iron Drakes in there. No one wants to face a double turn of being smashed by a Hallowheart magic phase or missile phase. And so your opponent will bias themselves to giving you that first turn. So you want to, these lists are all designed to punish that as well, or at least give you an option to punish that if the opportunity arises. Otherwise, as Coach said, if you can be stuck doing a pretty ineffective first turn, casting a couple of buff spells, but yeah, your army a bit's too slow, can't really do much, bit of positioning, and then you're sitting around waiting to be double turned against.
Yes, and like when we look at some of your list varieties, there's some really interesting synergies, right? Or there's some interesting things to call out. So your Hurricanum is going to give +1 to the cast of all of your collegiate arcane wizards, which is essentially your Hurricanum, your Luminarch, and your battle mages. The sorceress does not get a +1 to cast from the Hurricanum. The battle mage itself is pretty cool because it has 8 different spells you can choose from. You must choose which realm that it comes from. Like you, I really like the spell from Hish, which basically puts a 1 unit as -1 to hit. But there are some other cool spells. I took one with from Shimon, which was like a D6 fireball. You've got the spell from Gur, which allows you to get +2 to your run and charge rolls.
That's my favorite of the lot.
It's a great one. There's a whole bunch of different ones, and considering it synergizes really well to the Hurricanum, it's a nice little power pair. If you're willing for the Hurricanum to kind of hang around, and the Hurricanum has great spells on it as well. Yeah. On the flip side, you've got the Luminarch, and the Hurricanum does a whole bunch of mortal wounds as well from its shooting attack. But where the Luminarch really comes into play is it has a probably not as damaging shooting attack as the Hurricanum, but the threat range is 30 inches shooting, obviously plus the movement, which is like 10 or 11. So the Luminarch has will really concern people. So if you're talking about dealing with Croak, you deal with Croak or that Lord of Change not by trying to go toe-to-toe with the magic, is you're popping them with Shadow Warriors, you're popping it with that Luminarch laser beam.
That's
Geminids
have Geminids with 26-inch threat range. So you got Geminids with 26-inch threat range, Luminarch with 40-inch threat range, your Shadow Warriors appearing anywhere with 18-inch threat range, 9-inch from an enemy. Usually between those 3 sources of damage, you can probably snipe out a key support hero if you focus on them, if your opponent's done. It probably won't kill a Croak if he's protected by some Saurus Guard, but it's going to worry Croak a bit, at least. It's going to force your opponent to defensively wrap Croak to allow that, and Croak won't like taking 2 turns of that for sure. It will force your opponent to then take out those threats to Croak, and that leaves your core of your army, the rest of your army, to start dealing with the rest of his army.
Yeah.
If we stay on for a moment, Coach, roll back up on the core. We didn't get to the other bits. So 30 Phoenix Guard almost probably don't need to be over elaborated. No.
I wouldn't mind elaborating for a second. No, there's a good point I wouldn't mind calling out. And a lot of people who are watching these videos probably hear a lot of people talking about Phoenix Guard. But in Hallowheart, I think they're needed more than ever. And there's a key reason for that. And that is that, this Hurricanum, this battle mage, if you do a double, Hurricanum and a Luminarch, that's a big, juicy center in your army that's worth a lot of points. And if you don't have something that can kind of protect them, there goes half your army.
I think protection is one thing, and there's various ways to protect, and Phoenix Guard as defense is one of their roles, but I think it's more you're going to be sinking at least 6, 7, maybe 800 points into magic, including your endless spells. Phoenix Guard are not a defensive unit. That's not their role. They are a multi-purpose unit. I sometimes see on various threads that, Phoenix Guard, they're just a defense unit. No, they are the best multi-purpose unit. And if you've sunk 600 points into one part of your army, you need a multi-purpose unit. So some games you'll need a bubble wrap and defend your fortress of magic power, and you'll need to fort up with the Phoenix Guard. But other games you need to get bodies pushed out onto the objectives in the middle, or to even be pushing into your opponent's end zone, and you're going to need some elite attackers to take the fight to the enemy and push them forward. So They're multi-role. The fact that they're a multi-role unit is really critical in Hallowheart, given you are sinking so many points into specialization around the magic.
Yes. So good point. They are both a great hammer and they're a great anvil, which is also why I can see you in your list 1 and 2. You've also got the Anointed on foot, which is a perfect synergy for the Phoenix Guard. So you're 100% correct. They will protect your army quite well if you need to castle up or defend. But the reason I always take them is because once they absorb a hit, they also can punch back, and they can punch back just as hard, if not harder, because the Hurricane's giving them +1 to hit. The Anointed for a command ability is going to be able to re-roll wounds. If they're within 12 or 18 of the Anointed, they don't have to take battle shock. So straight up, and like they got range 1, they got 2-inch range.
The 2-inch range is worth calling out. The Phoenix Guard are on 25 mil bases, which means the 2-inch range gets you effectively a 3-rank attack by the time you kind of position them properly. That they are one of the only units in the game with a 2-inch reach, an elite attack profile, 2-inch reach on 25 mil bases.
Yeah, 25 mil is huge.
It's huge. It really increases their attack power effectiveness. They were in previous editions in Firestorm version. They were 360 points for 30, and probably the most points efficient unit in the entire system. They're 420 points now for 30. That's a lot of points going into them. Some people, when they talk cities, go, well, Phoenix Guard are underpointed. That's not true. I think they're fairly pointed relative to the overall system. I would probably argue that many of the other options within cities for your elite infantry are probably overpointed and need a copper points reduction to make them viable relative to Phoenix Guard as your option. Like Black Guard, for example, Phoenix Guard just so much better all round.
I was having this discussion with a friend the other day about great swords, and as much as I love great swords, they are the same points. They're like literally the same points, and they do some mortal wounds on a 6 to hit. But if I've got great swords versus Phoenix Guard, hands down, I'm taking Phoenix Guard. But it is, if a unit of 30 is going to be a 1/4 of your army. Put an Anointed in, you're now at 500 points straight up. So
so they're great, and that's why, again, if you're going to sink so many points, they need to be multi-roll. The third thing in the final thing in the core is the Sisters of the Watch, which I've had a lot of questions over. Sisters of Thorn. Why are they there? They are a wizard, so they also get the Hallowheart bonuses for wizards, extra spell, the bonuses to magic, the extra picks. And the way I view them is you've actually got here a very multi-role unit. 130 points gets you a 2-caster wizard with 10 wounds that takes up roughly an 18-inch board space between their 60 mil base as an inch gap and five models in the unit. That gives you a lot of zone control. And so the role the Sisters of Thorn almost always do is they sit behind my back line and act as the zone out control. So people can't deep strike or edge strike from the board behind my front line. Usually you've got like the Phoenix Guard on the front line, the wizards hiding behind the Phoenix Guard, and then the Sisters of Thorn protecting the backfield so your opponent can't get in and take out those wizards from deep strike shenanigans. So Sisters of Thorn, 130 points for a multi-role unit. In the mid or late game, you can then send them forward to contest an objective. Depending on the mission pack, you might be able to seize an objective with them. If it's a teleporting orb or relocation orb, they count as a wizard for that. Very effective in that mission. And as well as that, we'll get to it. They do synergize with the Eternal Guard as well in one of these builds pretty well. So for 130 points, you get a lot of value in another multi-role unit there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I
And
can
that's
see
why
you've got
they're
a
in the
whole
core.
you've got a whole bunch of endless spells, which I really love. I can see you've got combination of things like Geminids, which you've already talked about, is a great damage dealing, but also a debuff for either the -1 to hit or the -1 damage. You've got Palisades there. You've got Soul Scream Bridge. I know I really enjoyed running Airworld Life Swarm. There's a whole bunch of endless spells I love running. That's just my favorite thing in the world, is running. Nothing makes me more happy than throwing endless spells at my opponents.
Yeah.
Talk me through some of the other, you've obviously got the Soul Screen Bridge and you've got Palisades. What's the strategy or what's the ideas behind that?
So Palisades ended up, I had 50 points spare. I wanted to position for a triumph, so I didn't want to fill out with, say, Aether Wings or a 50-point spell. 1980, I tend to build most of my lists at 1980 or 1970 to fish for a triumph. I find them good value for sacrificing 20 points. The Palisades basically just was a point filler, and I don't think I cast it a single time at CanCon. It ended up just being a wasted space, to be honest. It can be effective if you're playing a control style, which is what I was intending with that list, but it just situationally never really came off. It tends to be quite situational. If you can block up a couple of bits of terrain, put the bridge in front, put the Palisades in front, and your opponent can't get through. The big downside to Palisades is it's a 5 cast, which means if you're critically using it to block up an opponent's kind of pathway of movement, they only need to roll a 6 to unbind it if it's a real critical move. And if it's not a critical move, then, well, does it really matter? So if it's a critical move, your opponent will get rid of it unless they're unlucky. And if it's not a critical move, then it doesn't really matter. So I've struggled to find value with Palisades, unfortunately.
I mean, if they try to unbind it, then there's one less spell they're casting.
One less spell, I suppose.
And because it's empowered by the realm, also on a 5+, the opponent's going to be -1 to hit from that radius. So
yeah,
there's some stuff in there.
There is some stuff in there, and I did have a thought at one point with that variant one. I could get opponent up to, I think, -4 to hit between the Luminarch casting Far's Protection on the Phoenix Guard, the Sorceress doing a Word of Pain on your opponent's main attack unit, dumping Geminids onto them for a debuff, and then if the Palisades was positioned appropriately, you could really drain the vitality away from that unit of 25 Slayers in Lord of the Lodge, which one of the local guys in Geelong, Nathan, he's a good Fire Slayers player, and a lot of my practice games at CanCon were playing against Fire Slayers Lord of the Lodge, so I was quite conscious of that as a threat and debuffing Lords of the Lodge. The rest of that first army, you've got the Anointed. I took both big units, so the Luminarch and the Hurricaneum, and the primary reason was I wanted both conversions and gunning for a coolest army nom, but there was a genuine tactical reason as well. It gave me redundancy. Having both big lots, I was actually thinking the meta would be quite Zench heavy, and I was a bit worried about KO with their long threat ranges as well. Being able to drop in and Alpha Strike me, take out my big guy, take out, say, the Hurricane if I only had one. And if they take that out, it's such a linchpin model for the army. You start to, if they can Alpha Strike and kill that thing on first turn, you're starting to struggle. So I wanted a bit of redundancy. The Luminarch's a very expensive choice, though, to create redundancy. It doesn't feel like it's efficient to be putting nearly 600 points in on that, and you're starting to run out of bodies. But it might be a medical, and it ended up working out for me anyway, because it is still a good model in itself.
Its War Scroll spell is a really good horde killer as well. So,
yeah. So, yeah, the Anointed synergizes with the Phoenix Guard. He's their captain of the Phoenix Guard. The No Battle Shock and re-roll wound rolls on the attack phase with a commander point. So very good synergy on the Anointed. The Anointed also had he was my general to get the advantage of the city's abilities for extra command points and to pass off wounds.
The adjutant,
and he also had Thermal Rider Cloak, and we skipped over the artifacts, but Thermal Rider Cloak tends to be my go-to artifact in Hallowheart, limited to Ashqui. And for the Anointed, my theory of the Thermal Rider was very much to contest those hero missions, 3 places of arcane power, and I'm not sure if there was 1 or 2 in CanCon, but he's quite fast moving. He can keep up with the Phoenix Guard and jump to the front lines if he needs to. And between his own 4-up DPR save plus potentially passing off wounds to one of the units of Dark Shards, he's basically a cockroach. He's really, really difficult to kill. Difficult to kill to the point of opponents won't even bother. Like, to kill a small foot hero with that much protection, they won't bother. They'll often forget about him, and he adds quite a bit of beef to the Phoenix Guard as synergy. And in the right mission, he's absolutely clutch when your Thermal Rider Cloak wearing Anointed can rapidly redeploy to seize a hero mission objective, or land on in Relocation Orb, land on with an artifact, count as 20 models by landing on the middle of the objective. It's a really powerful option to have. So that's why Anointed wearing the Thermal Rider tends to be a kind of go-to option for me, with the flexibility that gives.
Yeah, I also take the Thermal Rider Cloak, but I'll often put it on things like the Hurricanum, because one of the things that I found with my army is that I kept getting bogged down with my battle line. The Hurricanum wasn't able to move up fast enough. So it allowed me to be able to fly over my screens and move where I needed that Hurricanum to do a whole bunch of mortal wounds. So obviously, you know, what we're doing here is we're kind of showcasing some different ways to do this.
Yeah.
You know, you obviously choose your own adventure on what seems to work for you. But I think it sounds like we're both big advocates of Thermal Rider Cloak.
Thermal Rider's, I think, the go-to choice for Hallowheart. Our own faction artifacts are pretty ordinary.
I would take the Witfire Tome.
Witfire Tome, if you're building around an endless spell list, and yep.
So I would take the Witfire Tome because I would always take the Battalion, so I'd have 2 artifacts. And what I would do with the Witfire Tome is I'd put it on my Anointed, which would make my Anointed a caster. But also the cool thing is, because in its ability it allows it to dispel a spell and unbind an endless spell, I could do that without impacting a spell cast. So I could be casting Ignite Weapons on my Phoenix Guard without taking away a spell or an endless spell from my Battle Mages, my Hurricanums, my other spellcasters. My Knight Incantor was another one that I would have. And I was running Everblaze Comet as well. So taking an endless spell from Stormcast and doing a whole bunch of area of effect damage to my opponents. And then I would combine that really well with my Anointed, because then my Anointed would unbind it. And then I would just recast it and just do a whole bunch of damage on a frequent basis.
I think I completely agree. The Witfire Tome is my number 2 artifact after the Cloak, and I agree. You give it to that foot hero, the Anointed or the Rune Lord type non-magic hero, to give them that extra spell. A couple of interesting things to be careful of with it is, it doesn't get the bonuses from Arcane Channel, because it doesn't
make you a wizard. Yeah, well, I had this discussion with someone the other day. It doesn't give you the wizard keyword. It just allows you to cast a spell.
And also, you won't get anything like the arcane bonus if there's some arcane terrain as well around. So just a subtlety there. Another subtlety on the Anointed as well as the Rune Lord, and I'd actually say this is probably an exploit that it's a subtlety that borders on exploit that needs to be fixed, is the Anointed and Rune Lord can unbind an endless spell in your hero phase, not at the start of the hero phase.
Yes. Yeah.
So you could do a little bit of shenanigans with that potentially. So firstly,
it's literally what I did. It's literally what I was doing. I was doing that with like Everblaze Comet.
You could do it with the Everblaze, and then you could you would effectively have 2 cracks at unbinding it. You can unbind it after you've cast it, as well as you could in the start of your next hero phase, you have another crack to unbind it, and then you still get to recast it again as well. So you could do it with Life Swarm. It synergizes well with Life Swarm to bring back effectively 2d6 Phoenix Guard.
I didn't do that. I'm not the black coach. I'm not using busted rules.
But you can. There's an option there, and it's a useful option. I suspect eventually it'll be factored and made to start a phase, but it's also not the only. Both the Anointed and Rune Lord have the same. They've gone through 2 facts, and I think Archaon and possibly the Lord of Change can also unbind during the phase rather than at the start of the phase. So they're not unique abilities. So maybe it was intended rather than sloppy. But it's a useful thing. Both the Anointed and the Rune Lord add to that magical supremacy as well. As Coach mentioned, you can get the an extra unbind that's not sucking up one of your spells.
Yeah. I know you've got things like you've got Shadow Warriors. We've got you've all of your lists have Shadow Warriors, and I think a lot of people know the benefits of a Shadow Warriors having to deploy them away from the board. They don't have to go on the table. You put them in cover. They get +1 to hit, +1 to wound. Curious on variant 1 and understanding why you had 2 units of Shadow Warriors, because some people have asked me in time, what their thoughts are on having more than 1 unit of Shadow Warriors. Why'd you land on 2?
I really pre-CanCon I was running a Firestorm list with 2 Deep Strikers, and I very much got used to the idea of 2 Deep Strikers, and the potential that brings in. I also was running pre-CanCon with 3 units of screens or backfield of some way or another. So 2 Dark Shards obviously are the screens, and if they deal some missile damage, so nice bonus, but basically they're just bodies, and board control. And I thought, well, okay, if there's any kind of mission, or if I'm in a matchup where I'm going to get alpha struck hard, I need to protect those Phoenix Guard with the layers of screens. I can always use one of the Shadow Warriors deployed in my key deployment zone rather than in Deep Strike as a screen. They're an expensive screen, but if the matchup dictates you need screen, you've got a screen.
Yeah.
The other thing, and I talked about it a bit with the Sisters of the Thorn, that I use them as a zone control. 2 units of Shadow Warriors give you a lot of zone control. You can put them both on the flanks in such a way, with careful deployment, that you can zone out a significant amount of effective board space from your opponent doing anything teleport or deep strike shenanigan with. Finally, if you need to kill those support heroes, you've got the Geminids, the Hurricaneum, the Luminarch's laser, and if you desperately need to kill something, drop 2 units of Shadow Warriors in front of it as well and fire into it. If they end up dying the next turn, so be it. If you've taken out that absolutely critical buff piece. They ended up flubbing in my Game 6 at CanCon. I was facing Zench with a Gaunt Summoner, and I had the first turn. I got 5 wounds off it, and the Shadow Warriors drew their bows and flubbed. Oh. But that was exactly what they were there for, to give me 20 shooters to just extend that threat range and take out those support heroes.
Yeah, the really good call. Another endless spell that I want to call out that I think is a great piece in this army as well. I'm a big fan of the Quicksilver Swords as well, because you roll 15 dice because it's from Cities of Sigmar, and especially against Chaos, you do 1 or 5+. You do mortal wounds, 6+ against other armies that aren't Chaos. You can throw it through an umbral spell portal and do some good damage because it has an area of effect as opposed to having to touch an opponent with like the pendulum or the purple sun.
Yep. If I had my time over, I'd dump the Palisades and take the swords for sure.
For 30 points, it's a no-brainer. It's so cheap. And then I can see, you've got things like the Free Guild Handgunners, which are not only a good screen, they do some good damage with, there's a long-range hero in there. Well, not a hero, but the unit captain has a 30-inch range shot that ignores Lookout Sir, and they get to shoot if they get charged against. So they're kind of like a nice little counterattack. You got some high movement.
It's a very nasty hedgehog, putting 10 Free Guild Handgunners as a screen in front of 2.9 inches in front of Phoenix Guard. So your opponent charges the Free Guild, obviously takes a few wounds as from the Free Guild stand and shoot rule. They then obviously slaughter the handgunners because they're rubbish in melee. That's not their role. But if the Phoenix Guard are standing 2.9 inch behind or 2.1 inch behind the line, the Phoenix Guard then step forward and counterpunch. And I love that counterpunch type play. And Phoenix Guard are defensive and powerfully defensive, but there's a lot of high damage stuff out there that you do need that ablative armor, a screen in front of them for them to remain effective.
Yeah, they're not immortal. You can't just put the Phoenix Guard on there and expect them
to.
They're not going to be there forever, and that's why I would take the Emerald Life Swarm as well to be able to bring back some bodies. Especially some of the armies that really hit me hard, and they'll do some damage. But for 50 points, I could bring back 6, 12, 18 up to during a game, which just extrapolates the value you get from Phoenix Guard.
I definitely pre-CanCon I trialed a lot of lists with Life Swarm. It was close to taking it, but I definitely agree that it's beneficial with the Phoenix Guard. You bring back a lot of points a model, so it can pay for itself if used well.
Something that I really want to ask you, burning question both from the chat and myself, is that unlike the other Cities of Sigmar, where you only get 3 spell choices to choose from, Hallowheart has 6 to choose from. Do you pick all 6? I mean, you've got things like Roaming Wildfire that's going to do some mortal wounds. You've got Searing Wounds, which is a heal spell. You've got Elemental Cyclone, which is probably one of the MVPs that does a mortal wound for every model in the unit on a 4+. You've got Warding Brand that's going to bounce mortal wounds back on a 4+. You've got Crystals, which is going to be ignoring spells and endless spells on a 4+. And then you've got Ignite Weapons, which allows you to add +1 to the wound roll to a unit. So there's a good diverse mixture of buffs and damage. What's your thinking behind the spells?
So in the CanCon, the Swish Army Knife, I was going for very much a toolkit list, as can be seen. That it's got a combo of kind of a mix and match of everything in there. And I did take at least one of all of them for that list. What I've found over time, Crystal Aegis has a pretty short cover range for a pretty modest bonus against really not that many armies in the meta. So
I dropped it.
Crystal Aegis I've now dropped. Though it did pay off in my game gains Zench, so I did make a couple of 4-up ignores. So that's it paid off, but I drop it nowadays.
But the other one, in saying that, when Teclis comes with his Lumineth, if we do have the Lumineth coming on the table, if we do have, Lord Crowe smashing and bashing, if we're going to have, more Zench supremacy, this might be worthwhile. But I'm with you. I'm with you. I didn't find enough value out of the crystals. But if Magical Supremacy, and we're seeing more Nagashes on the table under Ossiarch Bone Reapers, I may reconsider having that.
I also took it at CanCon because we had Realm spells, so I was expecting a magic heavy meta to take advantage of them. I didn't run into a Nagash, but I was expecting a lot of OBR Nagashes, which there were there, but I dodged them. And highly effective in a magic heavy meta. And if if the event or your local game is using the realm spells, Crystal Aegis is definitely take that, because there's going to be a lot of magic.
Yeah.
I actually, you hyped up Elemental Cyclone, and yes, it is good. The problem I've always found with it, though, is getting in effective range to do a lot of damage. If your wizards are up in range to be able to hit that big unit, they've got threats. So I probably find that as the second spell that I drop. Seer Wounds, you need to heal up after you take your Arcane Channel, so that's a must-take on in the list. Ignite Weapons is incredible on your Gyrocopters or your Iron Drakes or your Phoenix Guard, on whatever you're attacking with.
I would so in my list I would have some 2 units of 20 handgunners, or I'd have like a block of 30 handgunners.
With Ignite Weapons is incredible.
Bringing them down to wounding on 2s is just.
Oh, it's beautiful. And we'll talk about what the Iron Drakes could do in the final moments. Roaming Wildfire is one of the best attack spells in the game. It can hit multiple units, and with a little bit of luck on the dice, you can bounce it to a fair part of the opponent's army. So I do tend to take 2 lots of Roaming Wildfire somewhere in the list. A Warding Brand then probably becomes the 4th. So Seer Wounds is essential. Ignite Weapons is the best of the lot. Roaming Wildfire for attack and damage output becomes my 3rd pick. A Warding Brand I lean to as the 4th pick. And used effectively, either you scare an opponent off attacking, or if you're playing a more aggro list, which is in variant 2 and 3, you can send a large unit forward, deal its damage, hold its. Even when an opponent hits it, it's going to deal 15 mortal wounds back at the opponent. And finding any spell that deals 15 mortal wounds by, I don't know, your opponent all in killing your Iron Drakes or your Eternal Guard, a 15 wound mortar spell's pretty nasty.
I've used that a lot on my handgunners. So if I have like a block of 20 handgunners, they get charged, they get to shoot before combat, and then they're going to die.
Deal another 10
armor save. Then they're going to throw another, up to 10. So it's pretty tasty for a spell.
Yeah, I really like Warding Brand as a damage output style spell and a control and a bit of scared. It gets in people's heads. They don't want to go near that.
I will say one thing about Elemental Cyclone. Now, you probably want to clarify this with your tournament organizer. There's a little bit of grey when it comes to this, but most tournament organizers are allowing Elemental Cyclone, the line, to be drawn from something like the Umbral Spell Portal. So if your wizard's next to an Umbral Spell Portal, and then you set up another Umbral Spell Portal on the battlefield, you can draw that 12 inches from the Umbral Spell Portal. It is grey. It's not 100% clear, but it is something you possibly could do. But as always, check with your tournament organizer with anything that's unclear.
I think Elemental Cyclone, you have to take the Spell Portal, or at minimum the Bale Wind, the Bale Wind to give you that extra range as well. Bale Wind gives you +6 range. Bale Wind is quite an efficient endless spell to add in here. It doesn't get empowered. There's no buff for that. But one of my tricks that I really like doing is a Battle Mage of Azure with Chain Lightning, or the Sorceress with Word of Pain. You put them on the front line. Your opponent gives you the first turn. Usually you can tell from deployment, is your opponent going to give you a first turn or not. You cast Bale Wind just in front of them, and you leap forward sort of the 5 inch of the Bale Wind's base from the deployment of the Bale Wind. And then you've got +6 inch on your Word of Pain, and your Roaming Wildfire become 24 inch spells. You're reaching pretty deep into the opponent's backline to be able to hit their key casters with 2 lots of D3 mortal wounds, which you then follow up with a Luminarch laser or a Geminids or something, and you've taken out a key support hero plus done a bit of other damage up front. So again, a combo of Bale Wind punishes an opponent that gives you the first turn. It gives you something that could do damage in that first turn if you're running a high drop list.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of illustrated, this is just 3 different ways that you've built. I've thrown some other examples. There's definitely some ways that you can tap into more of the dwarf type builds as well. Whether you want to go exclusive to humans, you want to go a combo city which takes the best of both worlds. I love the fact you got the Rune Lord. I've seen some nice little cheeky combinations where there's the Hallowheart command trait of Famed Spell Hunter. So you get +3 to the roll when you try to unbind an endless spell. So using the Knight Incantor's Everblaze Comet, and then using like an Anointed or a Rune Lord with +3 to then unbind that, and then cast it again, unbind, cast, unbind, and just doing absolute havoc with the because it is 100 points for this Everblaze Comet. So you want to make the most of it. So I've seen that worked really well. But then on the flip side, I look at things like Veteran of the Blazing Crusade, which then makes basically your whole army immune to battle shock wholly within 18. So that's brutal.
I've got to be honest, those two, you can do it. And if you're running the right list that you need that battle shock, it's great. But I default to Warden of the Flame. That's what I almost always take, that extra CP on a 4-up. So you've got the Adjutant or the Lieutenant plus the Warden. You're going to probably generate an extra CP each turn, and that's allows you to use your Arcane Channel, and you've got that spare CP either for Battle Shock or for a combat CP or a run and charge or something like that.
See, because I was taking the battalion, I found that I always had enough. I never felt like I struggled with my command points because the battalion gives you +1 to cast and +1 to unbind. And while that doesn't sound like a lot, getting the extra artifact, getting the extra command point, lowering my drops was well worth 140 points for something that I was already taking, which is at 3 to 8 wizards. And that was the way I perceived it, but I know none of your lists had the battalion.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time, but I just want to chat about one other list that's powerful in Hallowheart. I'll try and keep it short. But the final list on the list was an Iron Drake Soulscream Bridge list. And I think there's various discussion of Soulscream Iron Drake combos out on the internet that you can read. But it's a powerful, powerful combo because it's a redeploy, not a move. And in Hallowheart with Ignite Weapons, getting that bonus to wound. The thing that wasn't listed on the list is I also have Longbeards that I just forgot to add to the slide, sorry. And so you've got the 30 Iron Drakes get to 2 attacks each, with the Rune Lord giving on +1 rend. They're on, and the Hurricaneum given on +1 to hit. You could teleport this unit forward to basically anywhere they need to go to hit anything they need. You end up with 60 attacks. Hitting on 2s, spend a CP to reroll 1s if you've got spare CPs. Wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s for the Longbeard's ability. -2 rend for a ranged attack. That is going to shred anything. Their unit captain has a torpedo. Torpedo's got a longer range and against monsters has bonus rend and D6 damage. So you've got a unit captain with 2 20-inch shots, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s, 3 rend 3, dealing D6 damage. That's insane for a unit captain and in what it can do. So Iron Drakes with Bridge. The Bridge is an expensive spell, so Hallowheart makes Bridge reliable to cast as well, which is its synergy. Bridge gets empowered for extra range, and then Ignite Weapons is another bonus, and inevitably you've got the Hurricaneum in for that bonus as well. That is a really nasty hammer to land on your opponent, and people are shit scared of it, to be honest.
I've seen, I've seen that used really well. I know there's another variant by using crossbows, because when a crossbow doesn't move, it gets double shot. So a unit of 30 crossbows are going to do 60 shots. Handgunners obviously can teleport around the board. Again, they get pluses to hit if they don't move. And that synergizes really well with the Free Guild General on foot, who adds +1 to hit and +1 to wound with a command point. I've also seen Sisters of the Thorn. That's the one on foot.
Synergize well. Sisters of the Watch.
Sisters of the Watch. Yeah, Thorn are on the Deers. Watch is on the foot. Sisters of the Watch, again, they do having a nice block of 30 and then teleporting them with the Umbral spell, the Soul Screen Bridge.
So all of those options are awesome. And in Hallowheart, you get the bonus to cast, so your bridge is reliable or more reliable. But you also put the ignite weapons for that bonus and then warding brand on them. If you're going to send your shooting unit into an aggressive forward position, putting warding brand that then blows up on your opponent. So they walk in, you drop a nuclear bomb on them with your shooters. Then your opponent has to deal with them because they don't want to face that again. They send in their attack mob, whatever's left, to take them out, and you blow up another 15 mortal wounds on them. And then you march your 30 Phoenix Guard forward, and your opponent doesn't have anything left that can handle the 30 Phoenix Guard.
Yeah, it gives you a really good opportunity to delete what needs to be deleted. But I think, personal preference, whether you want to go dwarves, elves, or human, there's something in there for you, which is pretty cool. There's a nice little combination for all.
One thing I will say about Iron Drakes, that combo, and I've just talked it up as really exciting. I'm about to drop it out of my core list. It will absolutely devastate most players who don't play well against it, but it can be screened off. Iron Drakes do only have a 16-inch range, and so an opponent could put a screen line in and leave his important stuff 7-inch behind that screen line. Teleport in at 9-inch, you're out of range to actually hit the important stuff, and that's the downside.
The crossbows are 24 inches.
That's why crossbows could be a more effective, efficient option on that basis, even though they don't get the rend and don't synergize with the Rune Lord.
No, but you'd take a free guild general on foot
instead.
Whatever that variety is. And some of the other Stormcast units that I really like. So I've mentioned the Lord, the Knight Incantor, but you've also got I played with a list before with the Lord Arcanum on foot, which is hard to find, but that has a really cool command ability. That
conversion opportunity, Magro.
No, I bought the legit one. I actually was able to source one from someone who built the Lord Tauron. But anyway, the point is that command ability allows you to move an endless spell an additional 6 inches. So again, Geminids, swords, pendulum, purple sun. So if you're going down the endless spell route, again, there's so much to choose from in this book, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I think the book's going to last a long time, given there's just so many tools. As the meta evolves, if not Hallowheart, one of the other cities will evolve with the meta, and there's so many toolkits in the cities book that you can tap into that. It's going to have a lot of legs for a long time. Maybe not at the absolute top tier, but it's going to take a long time before it dates out as a book.
Yeah, and while we're in this world of magical supremacy, I think Hallowheart has its place. It's something that I think you're going to enjoy.
Probably the one downside to be conscious of with people is organization of your spells. If 8 spells, you've got a very long hero phase, that's your domination, and your opponent can start rolling their eyes, and it can be a bit less fun as it's the hero phase is a non-interactive part of the game versus, say, melee. Be conscious of that with your opponent. One thing I do, and my opponents have seen it, I've got I don't know how well it's coming up, but like quite detailed trackers of, okay, what does everyone do? How many spells have they cast? I put dice down on those square boxes to keep track of everything. Absolutely, for Hallowheart or for any other hero phase intensive list that you take, definitely build a kind of cheat sheet that you can give to your opponent that outlines all the threat ranges, summarizes roughly what the spells do, and keep track of who has cast what and how many spells. It's pretty essential, as well as for your own noggin to keep track of it all yourself.
So a couple of hints that I would share is at one, AOS Reminders, great website. It'll put all your spells and your threat ranges and your casting values on some single pages. So check them out. Some things that I did as well to speed up my hero phase is I use special dice, and I put those special dice next to each of my wizards. So they would be basically my cast. So as I cast, I would take one off, and I use the old Winds of Magic dice from Warhammer Fantasy Battles, and because they're very, very cool, but they were very different to my wound tokens and the regular dice that I was casting. I made sure that they were special, and I made sure my opponent knew that these 2 dice next to every wizard meant one of my casts. So every time I pick up a spell, that would be how I would track. And then AOS Shorts, on their website, they have a whole bunch of spell cards. So they're in the size of Magic the Gathering, kind of just like a little playing card. But it'll have all your spells on different little playing cards. So you could go down to the printer, print it yourself, and you could almost have like these little cards. So they sit next to your wizard, so you know what spell you're casting and what you're not. So you're not casting Warding Brand off one wizard when actually on your army list it's on a completely different wizard.
Yeah, and that's why I again use that, and like you said, I got some special arcane looking, cool, elvish, mystical dice, and I use those cards as well. Another really cool one I do, you do definitely want to have good tokens for all your buffs, so you can keep track of it, and your opponent keeps track. One that I do that is I've bought cheaply from Officeworks those little table number stands that you see at cafes that have like you're on table 1, there's a little slot in. So I've bought a few of those, the little clip, and you just put the spell card in and you put that next to the unit of Phoenix Guard with all the buffs on it, and you end up with a forest of these things because there's so many buffs, and you just point that card at your opponent. Your opponent's got no excuse for not going, I forgot that you had that buff on that unit. So it's just part of the politeness of the game as well. Make it easy, not only for yourself, but for your opponent to remember what the hell you have done and what all those buffs are going to do to your army.
It does get confusing for this army. So go to like Pro Painted has tokens, go get them. And if you didn't buy the War Scroll cards that came with tokens from Games Workshop, there are some people who make acrylic ones. I think, long story short, have some markers so it's very clear who has what buff, because there is going to be a lot of buffs kind of being dished out. Last couple of questions, Michael. We kind of like rapid fire these ones, and then I want to kind of wrap it up with a nice little sexy one. So we've kind of talked about magic being the dominance in this army, and we don't want to over rely on it, but certainly the strength of being able to apply buffs, endless spells, debuffs, unbinds, all that good stuff. What's the thing that's going to stop you from winning? So what's your biggest concern on the tabletop?
So the single army I've struggled against most is a optimized Big War. I've lost twice to optimized Big War. Big War is very dangerous in the meta at the moment. It's super powerful. Main reason is your damage output to churn through the sheer number of wounds that it has on its cheap screens is difficult, and its threat ranges with Brutish Cunning, Iron Fist, Mighty Destroyers moves, and their various spells for free movement are problematic because you get longer threat range than these lists that I've had. So you have to be on the defensive, and it's not a good position to be in Age of Sigmar. Generally, defensive is not. It's hard to win from a defensive position. So Big War I've struggled with. The other thing I've recently struggled with is going to be Crowe, I think. That's bit of a not to unpick, and I think I'm going to actually adjust my list a little bit to take on the Seraphim.
And this show right now is happening before the General's Handbook 2020, so we don't know what scenarios are coming up. We don't know if any of our point values are going to increase or decrease. But certainly, the rise of Seraphon, we can only imagine the Lumineth Rune Lords are going to be very strong in magic. So how we handle those challenges, I think, is a question mark. I think what you've got around the Luminarch is a good start. But as you've pointed out, it's probably not enough to take down a Croak. So how do we handle the Croak? Or is it a limitation we just accept and try to dominate the other armies?
No such thing as a perfect list. This is Hallowheart can build a powerful list that your opponent walks in and goes, this is a bad matchup for them. But there are inevitably bad matchups, rock, paper, scissors to everybody. I think the other thing to be conscious of here, there is a little bit of a swing factor to this list. You can flub with a 1 on your Arcane Channel followed by a double 1 cast, and that lost me a game at SA GT. I had Sylvaneth standing there, and Nick, if you're watching, love you, man. Love your Sylvaneth. Beautiful models, beautiful player. Alariel was standing out the front just waiting to be teleport bridge struck by my Iron Drakes, and I rolled a 1 for Arcane Channel followed by a double 1 on my cast, and bang.
That happened to me. I played Matt Campbell, who is a very proficient Masters level, won CanCon in 2019, Blades of Corn. He's just an absolute guru. And I'm playing Matt Campbell round 5 of a teams tournament last year. And, he was running up his Bloodthirsters. He had, the Incessant Rage. He had all the Bloodthirsters in the world. And I'm like, right, they're about to charge me. I'm going to hammer the crap out of them. And I roll a 1 on my Arcane Channeling. I roll nothing but double 1 and 1 and 2s. And Matt, who, I haven't seen this side of Matt before because he's very, very focused. He's very, very good at what he does. He looks at me and goes, "That's the worst rolling I've ever seen."
Yeah.
And I think that's something you need to accept, is that yes, there is a good chance that you can get +6 on your cast, but then there's also going to be a +1, and you're going to take damage as well. And all of those spells you're trying to cast, the ones on a 7, the ones on a 6, and the spells are quite generous when it comes to the spell casting. What you want to do is you want to cast high enough that your opponent can't unbind. It's not that you can't get them off. It's that they're 5, 6s, and 7s, and your opponent just goes, "Nah,
still unbind them." Or it's a complete flub, a triple 1 effectively, and it happens. So, look, it's a dice rolling game. You can't eliminate that risk. I think Hallowheart you can put yourself in a good position to put most dice roll odds in your favor, which if you play the game in a competitive sense, if you've skewed the game in your favor, that's the best you can hope for, rather than controlling it completely. And occasionally key dice roll is just going to kill you, and that's the game.
It kind of goes back to our first point, and that is don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Have 3 or 4 different threat pieces, and really think about them independent of your wizards. We've shown some really good examples of that in the show, but just don't put all of your eggs in the basket, as tempting as it is in Hallowheart.
I think one other one I'll raise, and I know we've now dragged on over time here.
It's all good, man.
Hallowheart, the bridge reliability and the bonus to cast, as well as empowered to give 24-inch range. One thing to be conscious of is how deep into the late game you can be and still be a threat to steal the victory. A lot of games are decided in turn 2 and 3 and effectively wrapped up, but any game that goes to turn 4 and 5 where it's still a game, the bridge is so critical because it gives you that teleport to move whatever you need to do to move to seize an objective. And in that turn 4, turn 5, sometimes it's a gamble because maybe you've run out of the ability to cast Arcane Channel and you need to kill off a unbind on the bridge wherever it is first and then recast it to be able to reposition around. But if you're in those desperate last moments, dying moments of the game, a bridge can win you the game by teleporting some unit over to some unprotected objective and getting those extra objective points. And that's optional for, I suppose, any army with the bridge. But Hallowheart, it works well because you've got those bonuses to cast and a lot of casts, and you are still likely to have a wizard alive in the end game. Wizards often don't survive past turn 2 in the meta.
This is also where Shadow Warriors become really valuable. They do the same thing without the casting cost, but they've got to be down by turn 4.
Yeah, canaries really pay off in that as well.
Good call out as well. Final question to bring us home, and then we can kind of do any shout outs. I know the Geelong boys are waiting for one final shout out, but based on all of your experience from playing this book, what have you learned that might not be as, I guess, obvious to the person who's reading it for the first time? So we've kind of talked already about the swings of the book. We've talked about the over-reliance. Is there anything else that you've kind of learnt that it took you a couple of games to realize?
That's a tough question. I'd probably say if you're picking up cities for the first time, if you're picking up mixed order for the first time, don't start with Hallowheart. There's too much to keep in your head, too many synergies, too many interactions and combinations. I evolved into Hallowheart from, as we discussed at the start of the show, from Firestorm, playing effectively mixed order with basically no faction abilities at all, +1 to unbind. Big whoopsie. It was actually I believe it made me a better player because I was not playing with all the complex synergies and interactions. I was keeping the game basic. And I've evolved my play now to be able to handle the more complex interactions such as Hallowheart. Hallowheart is definitely up there as one of the more complex factions you can play.
I would probably argue it's the most complicated of the Cities of Sigmar.
Yeah. And that puts it, with all the combos, all the options, I think it puts it in the sort of maybe the top 3, if not outright, as the most complex.
It's not as complicated as Gits. As a Gits player, I'll say Gits is probably Gloomspite Gits Wizards. Like the Gits part is super complicated, but I think you've made your point. Your point is it is complicated.
It's a complex list. If you're relatively newcomer to the game, Hallowheart's maybe not the first thing to jump into. Maybe go a Hammerhall or something, which is still a lot of fun. A Tempest Eye, a lot of fun, and quite good. Maybe build up your skill and understanding of threat ranges and overlapping and keeping your heroes within range of their buffs and spells being effective. That's a bit of the art to the game that you absolutely need to do for Hallowheart to be effective with it, and build yourself up to play Hallowheart.
Love it. Someone in the chat's called out a really good question that I got really excited about early. I thought, yes, this is the I actually come up with this idea, and I'm like, this is the greatest idea in the world. And then I realized it wasn't actually how it works. And they're asking about evocators on Dracolines. So I'm like, yes, they cast spells. Yes, I'm going to... Oh, wait. It doesn't work nearly as well.
They can only cast their own spell.
Unlike the Sisters of the Thorn, they can only cast their own spell, which I'm like, yes, because I really wanted something that was fast and I could hit hard. And I'm like, yes, kitty cats, yes. No.
I played and I completely mangled it, and it was practice game or whatever, but coming into CanCon, I saw Hallowheart, I saw that, I misplayed it, I dropped down 10 evocators into the list, gave them an extra spell. Yeah. I knew Mirror Pool was in CanCon. I was going to teleport them forward with +3 to charge from, or +2 to charge from the Battle Mage of Gur, cast 2 spells on themselves. And you can't actually do that. The Stormcast unit wizards don't work. The Sisters are really, really good because they are a unit wizard that gets that bonus. So the Stormcast.
They're not restricted like the evocators. And that would probably be my closing comments before Michael, you wrap the show up. And that is that look at the Stormcast Eternals book, because it's the only book for Hallowheart that we can bring in non-ally. So look at where the synergies come in, and you can apply the Hallowheart keyword. So for me, the big discovery early on was using the Lord Arcanum. The Lord Arcanum on foot, no one has run, mostly because it's a very hard model to find. Everyone runs the Incantor. No one runs the Lord Arcanum. I got to play with some really cool stuff. I got to take the Dias, the little endless spell, little circlet, and that gave my wizard a 12-inch fly move, so I could run them around the board, and it was I could do elemental cyclone, I could do some cool stuff. But there's a lot of cool stuff.
Prime Electrids as well. You're doing up to D6 damage, likely doing D6 damage with the bonus to cast. That's that's pretty nasty.
Yeah, it's huge. So like do look at not only the Cities book, but look at Stormcast and look where within their wizards they might synergize really well. Because I picked a couple, and I'm sure there's lots more out there.
Yeah. Other allies, we touched on Canaries. They're good. Those Shadow Warriors tend to be better. It's if you've got 110 points, take Shadow Warriors. If you're down to only having 90 points, definitely have a think about Canaries.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably that's about it for allies into Hallowheart. You've got all you need in the book, other than.
And I probably would say, let's not take Gotrek. Gotrek's probably a little bit too expensive.
Too expensive. You've got 600, 700, 800 points in Magic, another 520 in Gotrek. You've got 6 models on the table by that point, and you've sucked up 1,300 points. You're going to struggle to have enough models.
Is there anyone you want to shout out? Anyone you want to close us off with? If people want to find you, where can they find you, Michael?
I'm mostly on Facebook, bouncing around all the Australian Age of Sigmar pages. So have a look there. Michael Clarke is quite difficult to find on the internet. There's only about.
Are you in the Cities of Sigmar page?
I'm in the Cities of Sigmar page. I'm in most of the Cinderfall gaming faction pages.
Conglomerate, worldwide, take over every Facebook page in the history of the world. I'll amalgamate one day.
I mean, most of the regional pages, AOS Sydney, AOS Geelong, etc. I'm most active in the local Geelong page, but yeah, you'll find me through Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. Just find me on Facebook. And everyone out there, I love talking cities. I love providing help to people on the chats on ideas. Love bouncing ideas around. So just feel free to bounce out. And if anyone wants my cool template for hero phase tracking all your stuff, happy to share it as well. Reach out and I'll flick it through.
Well, make sure to go on to the Facebook group for the Cities of Sigmar. There's one that's like very, very large. Go join it. You'll find Michael. I'll be posting this video up there later. If you enjoyed this video, as always, smash that like button. Leave me a comment. I'd love to know how you guys are building your Hallowheart lists. Michael, thank you very much for your time. This was super insightful, and it was great to talk Hallowheart with you again. I know you and I talked a long time exploring the book. I have put it down while I've explored Tempest Eye, and I've been building like a flying Gotrek list in Hammerhall. So I haven't talked Hallowheart for a while, but it was super awesome to talk with you and just hear how your list is evolving. You know, we've had Wrath of the Everchosen, we've had Seraphon, we've had Disciples of Zench. There's only stuff coming, so your list will evolve.
Yeah, and like I said early, Cities has a lot of depth in it. It will be around for a long time, and despite having other armies, I keep coming back to it as my first love. So, Mixed Order, and Cities is effectively the evolution of Mixed Order. Coach, awesome. Thank you for having me on. Final comments would be a shout out to the Geelong crew. You guys are awesome. If anyone is ever down in Geelong coming through, there's also cheap flights from Sydney into Avalon or Gold Coast into Avalon, so feel free to do that. We run two large-scale kind of 50-man tournaments a year down here, 2-day events, which we get good representation at, particularly from the Bendigo crew, the Measured guys. Shout out to them. It's kind of our sister regional city in Victoria. We game every Tuesday night, very open to newcomers in the Geelong or Melbourne region. Come down every Tuesday at the Guff store, or at least once COVID stops. And I personally host at my place in my garage gaming shed set up probably once every 2 or 3 weeks on a Saturday night for a few drinks and laughs and sometimes a barbecue in there. So open invite to any friend of Coach who's a sponsor of the show. It's a friend of mine. So
my audience is American, and like another 30% coming from England. So I'm sure they're looking forward to your barbecue during summer. Just hit up Michael. But it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
For those international, Geelong is near Torquay. So if you are having an international holiday, it's a great place to come down once COVID finishes. So again, Coach, thank you. I'll leave the plug there. Thanks for inviting me on.
It's a pleasure. Thanks very much. And guys, don't forget to use your triumphs when you get them. See you folks. And until next time, don't forget the triumph.